I want you to think about something for a moment before we get into the technical details, before the diagrams, before the cost breakdowns, before the engineering specs. I want you to sit with a single image, a truck driver, not a soldier, a regular logistics worker. He's been driving this same highway in eastern Poland for 11 years. He hauls grain, machine parts, industrial equipment. He gets paid by the load. He has a wife and 2 kids in Krakow. He stops at the same gas station every Tuesday morning. Tonight, without fully understanding what he's carrying, he is the most important person in the air defense of a city of 300,000 people. And nobody, including him, knows it yet. That story is where this documentary ends. But to understand it, we have to start somewhere else entirely. We have to start with the most uncomfortable piece of arithmetic in modern military history. The drone that triggered each of those 3 intercepts you just saw cost $20,000 to build. $20,000. That is roughly the price of a used car. A decent used car, not a luxury vehicle. A Chevy Malibu. A Honda Civic with 100,000 miles on it. That is the weapon. The interceptor that destroyed it, $3,800,000. That is a 190-to-1 cost ratio. In the attacker's favor. Let me be very specific about what that means in plain English, because I think most people hear that statistic and nod along without really feeling the weight of it. If you are the attacker and you want to drain $1 billion from your enemy's defense budget, you spend $5.3 million on drones. If you are the defender using Patriot missiles, you spend $1 billion shooting them down. You haven't won a battle. You haven't taken territory. You haven't destroyed anything of military significance. You have simply forced your enemy to spend $1 billion, and it cost you $5 million to do it. Now scale that up to a real conflict. Ukraine, in 2023 and 2024, was facing somewhere between 100 and 300 drone and missile attacks per month during high-intensity periods. Not all of those required a Patriot intercept, but many did. And the financial math that underlies every single one of those intercepts is the same. Russia spends $20,000 to $50,000 per drone. Ukraine, or rather, the Western nations supplying Ukraine, spends $3.8 million per intercept. The exchange ratio is so catastrophically lopsided that it almost doesn't seem real when you write it down. But here is what makes it even worse. Here's the part that should genuinely concern anyone paying taxes in a NATO country. 1,000 intercepts. That is a medium-intensity month in the kind of conflict Ukraine has been fighting. 1,000 intercepts cost $3.8 billion. The attacker spent approximately $50 million to force those 1,000 intercepts. That is a return on investment from the Russian perspective of 76 to 1. $76 of NATO defense budget destroyed for every dollar spent on a drone. And here is the strategic insight that makes this frightening rather than just expensive. The goal was never to destroy the city. The goal was never to win a battle. The strategy was to make defending the city financially unsustainable. To slowly, methodically, mathematically bankrupt the defense. Not with a knockout punch, but with 1,000 small bleeding wounds over months and years. This strategy has a name. It has been used before. And it is working. The saturation strategy was theorized by Soviet military planners in the 1970s. The core insight was elegant in its brutality. If defending costs more than attacking, and if the attacker has access to cheap industrial production, then the defender's only possible outcome is eventual resource exhaustion. You don't need to destroy the enemy's military. You need to make the enemy's military too expensive to maintain. We are living through the first full-scale, real-world test of that theory. And the theory is passing. Now, Raytheon, the company that makes the Patriot system, produces approximately 550 PAC-3 interceptors per year. That is their maximum production capacity. Ukraine, during high-intensity conflict periods, has been firing interceptors at a rate that would exhaust that entire annual production run in a single month. A single month. And that is just one country in one conflict. If you are sitting in Warsaw right now, or in Tallinn, or in Vilnius, and you are looking at your air defense stockpile, and you are watching what is happening in Ukraine, and you are running the same arithmetic I just walked you through, you are afraid, because the numbers say that the current paradigm is not sustainable. Not in a decade, not even in a few years of serious conflict. On the left is the current solution. On the right is the beginning of the next one. By the end of this documentary, you are going to understand exactly what is inside that container. You are going to understand what it costs, in full detail, component by component. You are going to understand who built it, who owns the most important part of it, and which nation is going to collect billions of dollars in licensing revenue for the next 30 years from every allied country that runs it. Because the solution to the most expensive problem in modern military history is not more expensive missiles. The solution is a completely different way of thinking about what a missile costs, who makes it, and most importantly, who owns the brain inside it. Before we get to the solution, I want to take you back about 30 years. Because the United States has already done what I'm about to describe. It's already working. It's already generating billions of dollars per year. And almost no one outside the defense industry knows it exists. The story starts in Sweden, of all places. In the early 1980s, Sweden decided it needed a new fighter jet. The Cold War was at its most tense. Sweden was neutral, officially, but it shared a long coastline with waters the Soviet Navy regularly violated. It needed something fast, cheap, and maintainable without a massive support infrastructure. Something that could operate from civilian highways as emergency airstrips if the main air bases got bombed. What Sweden built was the Saab JAS 39 Gripen, and it is, by almost any measure, one of the best value propositions in the history of military aviation. The Gripen costs approximately $30 million per unit. The F-35, which NATO has been pushing on everyone, costs between $100 and $115 million depending on the variant. The F-15EX, Boeing's latest, is around $87 million. The Eurofighter Typhoon, about $90 million. The Gripen, $30 million, less than a third of an F-35. And it is deployed by 8 nations, with negotiations ongoing with at least 6 more. That is why it sells. Not because it is the most advanced jet in the sky, because it is the most affordable advanced jet in the sky. And affordability, it turns out, matters enormously when you are trying to defend a country with a defense budget measured in the billions rather than the hundreds of billions. But here is the part most people do not know. Here is the thing that makes the Gripen story relevant to everything we are going to talk about today. Inside every single Gripen is an American engine. A General Electric F404 derivative, called the RM12 in Swedish service, designed entirely by GE, manufactured in Sweden by Volvo Aero under a licensing agreement. GE designed the engine. GE owns every patent on the core turbofan technology. GE earns a per-unit royalty on every engine produced in Sweden. GE collects an annual maintenance fee for access to technical documentation and engineering support. And when GE develops a performance upgrade, better fuel efficiency, more thrust, improved high-altitude performance, every nation operating the Gripen has to negotiate a new licensing agreement to access it. Sweden builds the jet. Sweden exports the jet. Sweden operates the jet. Sweden takes the credit. America collects the check. GE's total annual revenue from the F404 and its derivative F414 engine family, covering the Gripen, the FA-18 Super Hornet, and a handful of other platforms, is estimated at approximately $2 billion per year. Per year. Recurring. Growing as new nations join the operator base. From jets that GE did not design the airframe for. In countries that GE does not govern. Under flags that GE does not fly. The engine is the intellectual property. Everything else is just manufacturing. Now, I want to make an analogy, because this concept becomes very powerful once you see the parallel. In 1991, Intel Corporation launched what would become one of the most influential marketing campaigns in the history of technology. The product was a sticker. 4 words on a sticker. Intel inside. Here is what that sticker meant. The computer you were buying, the physical machine, the plastic casing, the keyboard, the screen, the hard drive, might be assembled by Dell or Hewlett-Packard or Compaq or any of a dozen other manufacturers. Those companies were doing the visible work. Their name was on the box. Their warranty was in the drawer. But the microprocessor, the single component that actually made the computer think, was made in America by Intel. The sticker told every buyer, no matter which country assembled this machine, no matter which company put their name on the outside, the intelligence running it is American. The brain belongs to Intel, and Intel is American. By 1994, the Intel Inside brand had become so valuable that PC manufacturers were actually paying Intel to include the sticker on their products. Think about that for a moment. Companies were paying to advertise someone else's component, because buyers had learned to look for the sticker before they bought. The brand was worth more than the part. The part was worth billions. Both were American. The Trojan Shield paradigm is the military application of the Intel Inside model, and the logic is identical, down to the structure of the licensing agreement. Allied nations can build the airframe. They can stamp the launcher housing. They can assemble the rocket motor from licensed components. Polish factories, Turkish propellant lines, South Korean electronics plants. They can paint their national flag on the container. They can have their defense ministers stand at a podium in front of it and announce that their country has achieved sovereign air defense capability. That announcement is true. They are not wrong, but the seeker head, the infrared camera and the artificial intelligence tracking algorithm that actually decides, in the final 3 seconds of the intercept, at exactly what angle to detonate the warhead against what specific target signature, that belongs to America. The software activation key that arms the kill chain before launch, American. The encryption protocol on the data link that connects the missile to the fire control system, American. The training dataset, hundreds of thousands of thermal images of ballistic warheads at different re-entry angles, different atmospheric conditions, different electronic countermeasure environments. That dataset is what teaches the AI to tell the difference between a ballistic warhead and a weather balloon at 40 kilometers. That dataset, American. The upgrade cycle that adds new threat profiles when Russia or China introduces a new evasion technique, American. Every single time that interceptor fires, in Poland, in Jordan, in Kenya, in Brazil, an American algorithm is making the terminal guidance decision. The allied nation pulled the trigger. America aimed the shot. Every allied nation that deploys this system becomes a permanently renewing revenue relationship with American intellectual property holders. Not a one-time sale. Not a foreign aid package dressed up as a security guarantee. A commercial relationship. The same kind Intel had with Dell and HP. An operating dependency with legal renewal cycles built directly into the licensing architecture. Every year the interceptors sit in containers without firing. The software license renews. Every 3 to 5 years when the threat environment changes, the upgrade cycle triggers a new licensing negotiation. General Electric has been running this exact model for 30 years. The model works. The model scales. The model compounds. What is new is not the concept. What is new is that no one has applied it to the mass-producible interceptor market, a market that the Ukraine conflict has made urgently, publicly, undeniably visible. That market barely existed at scale in 2020. It is enormous now. And whoever defines the technical standard for affordable interceptors in the next 3 years will own the revenue stream from that market for the next generation. That is not an exaggeration. That is exactly what happened with Intel. They defined the standard. For 30 years, every personal computer that mattered ran on their standard. They collected licensing revenue on every one of them. The nation that defines the Freya Alt standard will collect licensing revenue on every interceptor that matters. And the precedent for that approach, the proof that it works, the legal framework that enables it, the diplomatic relationships that make it possible, is already flying right now over the Baltic Sea, 30 meters above the water, at Mach 1.8. Powered by a General Electric engine that is generating approximately $5,000 in royalty revenue with every flight hour it logs. I want to do something that almost never happens in defense technology coverage. I want to take you through the exact cost of every single component in this interceptor. Not estimates, not ranges, specific numbers at specific production volumes, because the argument for this system lives entirely in the numbers, and the numbers only work if they are real. We call this design the Freya Alt, named for the Norse goddess associated with both war and protection, and the alt suffix signals what it is, the alternative, the affordable, distributable, manufacturable, anywhere alternative to a $3.8 million single-source proprietary paradigm that is, as we have just seen, mathematically failing. Let me take you through it, component by component, dollar by dollar. Start with the seeker head. Because the seeker head is where the real revolution happens. The seeker head is the brain of the interceptor. It is the component that turns a fast-moving metal tube into an intelligent weapon. It is also, historically, the most expensive component. The Patriot PAC-3 missile segment enhancement uses an active radar seeker head that costs between $800,000 and $1.2 million per unit. That single component, a component smaller than a shoebox, accounts for somewhere between 20 and 30% of the total interceptor cost. It is the reason the Patriot costs what it costs. So why does it cost so much? There are a few reasons. Active radar seekers are technically sophisticated. They transmit their own radar signal, process the return, and make guidance decisions all in a package that has to survive Mach 5 flight and 40G turns. They require very specialized manufacturing. They are produced in relatively small quantities. And they are procured by government contracts that, let us be diplomatic, do not always prioritize cost efficiency. The Freya Alt asks a fundamentally different question. Instead of, what is the most capable seeker we can build regardless of cost? It asks, what is the minimum capability needed to reliably intercept the actual targets we face? And what is the cheapest way to achieve that minimum? The target set for this interceptor is specific. Ballistic missile warheads re-entering the atmosphere, cruise missiles flying at low altitude, and heavy loitering munitions of the Shahed class. Every single one of these targets shares one critical characteristic. They are hot. I mean that literally. A ballistic warhead re-entering the atmosphere at Mach 7 generates surface temperatures between 1,000 and 3,000 degrees Celsius just from aerodynamic friction. The air in front of the warhead cannot get out of the way fast enough, so it compresses and heats up, and the heat transfers to the warhead surface, and the warhead glows, not faintly, brilliantly. In the infrared spectrum, a ballistic warhead descending through the upper atmosphere is one of the most thermally intense objects you will ever observe. It is louder, thermally speaking, than almost anything else in the sky. A cruise missile flying at low altitude has a jet engine. Jet engine exhaust is detectable by a modern uncooled infrared sensor at ranges of 30 kilometers and beyond. A Shahed drone runs a piston engine, the same basic thermal signature as a lawnmower from an infrared standpoint, but consistent, trackable, and clearly distinguishable from background noise. To an uncooled long-wave infrared sensor pointed at the sky, a ballistic warhead is not a difficult target to find. It is an obvious one. The sky is cold. Space above the atmosphere is essentially absolute zero. Even the upper atmosphere is extraordinarily cold by any practical standard. Against that cold black background, a warhead at 2,000 degrees Celsius is not hiding. It is screaming. The engineering challenge is not detection. It is not even tracking. A modern AI tracking algorithm running on commercial-grade hardware can lock onto a thermal source like this in milliseconds and not let go. The challenge is terminal guidance, steering the interceptor to within the lethal radius of the warhead at closing speeds that exceed Mach 7 when you add the interceptor's velocity to the warhead's velocity. That is the hard part. And that is the part the AI handles. The uncooled long-wave infrared sensor array that does the initial detection and tracking. At production quantities of 10,000 units per year, it costs $6,500. This is the same fundamental technology used in commercial thermal security cameras, in automotive night vision assistance systems, in the handheld wildlife cameras you can buy at any sporting goods store. At 10,000 units per year, the unit economics approach consumer electronics. Because at that production volume, it effectively is consumer electronics. Paired with the sensor, an edge computing processor, the NVIDIA Jetson Orin NX, or an equivalent from Qualcomm or AMD, any of several commercially available chips in this processing class will work. At production quantities, this chip costs under $3,000. It runs a track before detect algorithm. Now, track before detect sounds like exotic military technology. It is not. It is the same computational architecture used in autonomous vehicle collision avoidance systems. The software that helps a Tesla decide whether the thing in the road is a pedestrian or a plastic bag. It is used in airport perimeter security systems. It is running right now in drone detection systems protecting military bases around the world, because commercial drone threats to bases turned out to be a problem that needed a solution faster than the defense procurement system could provide one. So the solution came from commercial technology, as it usually does. The algorithm we are talking about has been trained on thousands of hours of ballistic and cruise missile flight data. That training data comes partly from simulation, partly from test ranges, and in the Freya Alt's ideal future, partly from real-world engagement data collected and processed by Ukrainian battlefield operators. The algorithm locks onto the target's thermal signature. It predicts the intercept geometry based on the calculated trajectory. It steers the interceptor. It triggers the proximity fuse at the optimal moment for maximum warhead damage probability. It does all of this autonomously, in the final seconds of flight, without any further input from anyone on the ground. Because at closing velocities above Mach 7, there is no time for human input. The physics of the engagement have moved faster than human reaction time. The AI is not a convenience. It is a physical necessity. $14,000. Complete. That is the guidance brain of the Freya Alt interceptor. Compare that again to the Patriot's $800,000 to $1.2 million active radar seeker. We have achieved a 98% cost reduction on the most expensive component of a ballistic missile interceptor. Not by compromising on the ability to find and hit the target. The thermal signature of a ballistic warhead means the LWIR sensor is actually better suited to this specific intercept geometry than radar in many scenarios. We have achieved that cost reduction by refusing to pay for manufacturing complexity and proprietary margins that do not improve kill probability against the actual targets we face. Now let us talk about propulsion, because this is where the second major cost revolution happens. The Patriot PAC-3's rocket motor is produced by Aerojet Rocketdyne under a long-term single-source government contract. It is a specialized, high-performance solid rocket motor that delivers approximately 300,000 newton-seconds of total impulse. That is the energy needed to accelerate a 100-kilogram interceptor to Mach 5 in under 10 seconds, which is what you need to intercept a ballistic warhead that is already moving at Mach 6 going the other direction. That motor costs between $600,000 and $900,000 per unit. It is produced by one company. It has a long manufacturing lead time. It is not available to allied nations for domestic production because the propellant chemistry and nozzle design are considered sensitive technology. So every PAC-3 interceptor in the world gets its propulsion from one factory in the United States. If that factory has a production problem, the supply chain for the entire Western Alliance's primary ballistic missile defense system has a problem. This is not a hypothetical concern. It is a documented bottleneck that NATO logistics planners have been flagging in internal assessments for years. The Freya Alt uses clustered commercial solid rocket motors. 3 motors in the first stage, each of the same class used in commercial small satellite launch vehicles and sounding rockets. The propellant chemistry, HTPB-AP, which stands for hydroxyl-terminated polybutadiene with ammonium perchlorate oxidizer, is used in everything from high-powered amateur rocketry to the space shuttle's solid rocket boosters. It is not an ITAR-restricted technology at the motor diameter class we are discussing. Any nation with basic aerospace industrial capability can manufacture these motors under license. 3 first-stage motors get the Freya Alt to Mach 3 in under 8 seconds. A single precision sustainer motor carries it to Mach 4.5 for the terminal engagement phase. The total impulse delivered is equivalent to the Mach 3. The terminal velocity is equivalent to the Mach 3. The kill geometry works, and these motors can be manufactured in Poland, where the aerospace industry has been growing rapidly since NATO expansion. In Turkey, where Roketsan already produces solid rocket motors for their own cruise missile and air defense programs. In South Korea, where Lignex 1 produces the propulsion for the Cheonggung medium-range surface-to-air missile. In Brazil, where Avibras has been manufacturing solid rocket propulsion systems for 30 years and already has export agreements with multiple countries. The geographic distribution of the production base is not a weakness. It is a deliberate strategic strength. No single factory shutdown, no single country's supply chain disruption, no single export restriction can take down the Freya Alt production network, because the production network is everywhere. Cost check. Propulsion assembly. Stage 1. 3 motors. Stage 2. 1 motor. $95,000 at 10,000 units per year. Now, the launcher. And this is the part that is genuinely, elegantly brilliant. Standard 20-foot ISO shipping container. The same container used to ship refrigerators to Lagos, electronics to Rotterdam, soybeans to Shanghai. About 200 million in circulation worldwide. Highways, ports, ships, rail yards. No military can track them all. No satellite can distinguish one from another at standard resolution. Modified internally. 4 vertical launch cells with blast-rated dividers, a pneumatic pop-top roof opening in under 2 seconds, a NATO Link 16 terminal inside, and a battery pack for 72 hours without external power. From the outside, indistinguishable from electronics or frozen beef. That irreducible uncertainty, any of 200 million containers might be a battery, has strategic value no fixed Patriot site can replicate. Cost check. ISO container launcher. 4-cell, complete. $48,000 per unit. Total per interceptor cost at 10,000 units per year. Seeker and guidance, $14,000. Propulsion assembly, $95,000. Airframe and structure, $42,000. Electronics, data link, power, $38,000. Warhead and proximity, fuse, $22,000. Integration, test, certification, $21,000. Total, $232,000. The new ratio, a $20,000 drone against a $232,000 interceptor. 11.6 to 1. The saturation strategy still works mathematically, but 10 times less well. And allied nations can now afford stockpiles large enough that attackers run out of drones before defenders run out of interceptors. That is not victory. That is deterrence. Here is something important to understand about how transformative defense technologies actually spread. It almost never happens through a single country deciding to arm the world. It happens through networks, through partnerships where everyone gets something they need, and where the total value of the network is larger than any single participant could create alone. The Freya Alt is not a weapon. The Freya Alt is a platform. And the difference between a weapon and a platform is the difference between a one-time sale and a 30-year revenue relationship. Weapons are sold once. They depreciate. Platforms create networks. Networks generate revenue that compounds over time. And networks create strategic dependencies, beneficial ones, that outlast any individual transaction by decades. Japan. Japan's relationship with defense exports has changed, first in 2014, then dramatically in 2022. Its industrial base, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Kawasaki, IHI, is extraordinary. Japan becomes the seeker head final assembly and certification nation. Uncooled LWIR arrays are sourced from South Korea, edge compute from NVIDIA's commercial chain. Final optical alignment, thermal calibration, software install, and unit certification happen at an IHI facility in Nagoya. IHI already manufactures precision aerospace guidance components under General Electric license. They know the quality systems. They know the U.S. licensing architecture. They have been doing it for decades. Japan gets manufacturing employment in a strategically important sector. America gets a trusted partner as the assembly node for the component that carries American IP. Every seeker that ships from Nagoya carries Japanese manufacturing quality and American algorithmic identity, inseparable. Canada. Bombardier has been building composite airframe structures for 50 years. A 6-foot, 13-inch diameter carbon fiber tube that survives Mach 4 is well within capability. The strategic reason is the Defense Production Sharing Agreement. Under the DPSA, Canadian defense production can be classified as North American content. When the U.S. sells a Freya Alt package abroad, Canadian-manufactured airframes count as North American content. The legal framework is 65 years old and fully tested. Canada builds the body. America sells the program. The DPSA keeps the economics and accountability aligned. Ukraine. Ukraine is not just a customer, or even primarily a manufacturer. Ukraine is the world's most advanced live testing and data generation environment for exactly the threats the Freya Alt addresses, and that role is worth more than any manufacturing contribution. The Seeker algorithm is machine learning. It gets better with real combat data, actual sensor readings from actual intercept attempts against actual threats. Since 2022, Ukraine has generated more relevant engagement data than any force in history. Ukrainian engineers have learned how Russian electronic warfare tries to deceive infrared seekers. They know operational trajectory profiles of Kinjal and Iskander. They have the data. The data makes the algorithm better. The licensing structure builds a formal pipeline from Ukrainian engagement data into training. Ukraine is compensated via a licensing fee and receives preferential pricing. And when a Freya Alt downs a Kinjal in front of international media, the order pipeline fills itself. Ukraine is the world's most credible proof-of-concept laboratory. Brazil. The Gripen connection is the master key for South America. Brazil already flies the Gripen EF, with operational relationships to GE Engine Tech and Saab avionics architectures aligned with Freya Alt's data link. Avibras has solid rocket motor manufacturing, export experience, and quality systems. The infrastructure to produce Freya Alt propulsion under license exists in Brazil today. Brazil as the regional hub creates employment and prestige, extends U.S.-aligned air defense architecture into the continent, and brings American guidance software into every regional interceptor bought through Brazil. They are inside the network for the first time. Fade out. 3 revenue streams. Per unit production royalty, $47,000. Annual software validation license, $2,800 per active unit per year. Major threat upgrade cycle, $18,000 per unit, roughly every 3 to 5 years. Example, 50,000 units over 10 years. Royalties, $2.35 billion. Annual software validation licenses, $140 million per year. Over 30 years, $4.2 billion. Major threat upgrade cycle, $900 million per cycle at 50,000 units, 6 to 10 cycles, up to roughly $9 billion. 10-year conservative sum to American IP holders. Production royalties, $2.35 billion. Annual software validation licenses, $1.4 billion. 2 major threat upgrade cycles, $1.8 billion. Total, $5.55 billion to American IP holders. This is a subscription model for national security. Dusk, on a highway in eastern Poland. A civilian truck glides past fields. 3 gray ISO containers secured on the trailer. No escort, no drama. Just another haul. Inside the cab, the driver checks a clearance code. He confirms a destination and waits. On screen, a quiet timer starts. Nothing moves but the numbers. At 001432, soft pneumatics whisper. The roofs of all 3 containers hinge open. 12 interceptors rise into view, silent, orderly, patient. The in-cab terminal blinks alive. NATO Link 16 handshake. An E7. Wedgetail appears on the scope. An inbound ballistic track resolves. TTI. 4 minutes, 12 seconds. The map highlights a city of 300,000. The driver steadies a breath, taps the authorization. First cell. Launch, a beat. Then the full first stage clusters ripple skyward. The roofs close. The diesel hum returns. The truck rolls back into traffic, unnoticed. The arithmetic has changed from 190 to 1 to 1 to 11.6 to 1. That shift doesn't just alter budgets. It alters deterrence, and with it, political will. Cut to the city. Trams, corner bakeries, a window left ajar, a glow of homework on a kitchen table. Ordinary night, unseen protection overhead. An algorithm written in California, refined by Ukrainian data, makes the hard calls in milliseconds, so no one else has to. The purpose of defense is ordinary life. A truck driver presses one button. The brain belongs to America. The containers belong to everyone. The ordinary Thursday night belongs to both. Black screen. Silence. The Trojan shield paradigm. The brain belongs to America. The containers belong to everyone. The peace belongs to both. Hold. Fade to end sting.